I will also put on live transcript for folks, I hope, or not live transcript. I think it's live transcript. Well, hopefully that will work. I'll work on it once Scott gets going if it's not. All right, so we are welcome. This is a presentation from the Land Steward Program Community Education Series. These classes are put together with the help of a very wonderful volunteer Land Steward committee. We reach out to instructors, we come up with ideas, we ask people what they want to learn about, coordinate and bring these presenters to you. If you have any questions or class ideas, you can email me. I'll put my email in the chat after I get off here. And we have as our backup, Marcy Kaminker is here. She's our wonderful chair of our planning committee, and she's our co-host. So if anything goes wrong with the technology, occasionally it's happened that she takes the reins. So if somebody else ends up being the MC, then there could be, that's what's going on there. Please, if you want to sign up for our classes, you can go to our website. And again, I'll put this link into the chat. Go to our website, scroll down, and you just click this join arrow, and you can sign up for our email list that will tell you about upcoming classes and nothing else. Please hang out for a minute at the end of the class and take our quick 3-question poll so we can see how we're doing with this and if Zoom is still working for you. If you go and you sign up, you will get announcements for our upcoming things. These are what we have upcoming from our program. Removing dead trees from steep terrain. So I don't know if any of you have been looking around at our, if you're in Southwest Oregon, there are a lot of dead trees on the hillsides. The droughts have been pretty brutal. So this will be talking with Rich Fairbanks about how to get some of those trees out of there, if that's something you might do or have a contractor do. We'll have June 15th, we have recycling today. So kind of an update on recycling, where it stands, how you can help with that. Then July 19th, that's going to be Zoom. July 19th, we have Green Your Garden with Graywater, and that's going to be an only in-person class. So Karen Taylor offered that as a Zoom class, and this will be more of a hands-on class. She'll have demonstration materials and things for us to look at there, but it will only be in person and there will not be a recording available. And then starting in September, we are going to have the Land Steward Training Program. So that's our 11-module training program from which all these volunteers and things come from. This is a comprehensive course, covers a lot of different topics that have to do with rural land management. You create a land steward management plan for your land. You meet lots of resources. We're going to be going into the field this fall. So it's been since 2019 since we were in the field. So this is going to be a field course. There will be relatively limited enrollment. So if you're interested in that, go to our website, look into it, find more information online, and you can also email me. Hope to see some of you there. Okay, so tonight we have pollinator stewardship, including pollinators in land or forest management plan. We have with us this evening Scott Good. He's a retired environmental scientist who worked in water treatment, bioremediation, and modeling the role of environmental factors in soil chemistry. He's currently developing carbon sequestration and petroleum-free farming techniques here in the Rogue Valley and teaching classes in regenerative agriculture and carbon farming techniques. He's really, he focuses a lot on this regenerative agriculture and soil health, and has now been looking into the pollinator aspect of that. He's a real polymath land steward. So with that, I will turn it over to Scott. I'll stop my share and you can get your presentation up there, and I'll put some of these links into the chat for folks.
Okie doke. Thank you. Let's see. I guess, should I go ahead and stop my video and then do the share?
Yeah, that's probably easiest.
Okay, good.
And I will stop my video as well.
And then, okay, just a second. You have to share first. Okay. Screen. Share. Okay, can everybody see? Can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Great.
good.
Yes.
Yes, sounds good, looks good.
Okay, great. I keep getting lost in the internet. It's frightening. Anyway, so this class really is about my engagement initially with the Oregon Bee Atlas and looking at the habitats of bees and taking samples. And I really found that in going out and looking and trying to take actually look at the pollinators, the bees themselves, I was so much more interested in their environment that I began to focus really on that. And the bee taxonomy and so forth is, you know, a good thing to work on. But really, the pollinator habitat itself is really what I began to focus on. And fortunately, OSU provided a pollinator steward. Well, actually, what it was a trial for pollinator steward program class. So I signed up for it, and it was one of the best presented Canvas style presentations I've seen. It was really tight, thoughtful, and guided you through the curriculum really, really well. And like all of those, if you really drill down and look into all the links that are out there, it can keep you pretty busy. But you know, you can get through it with 4 or 5 hours a week, just answering all the quizzes and that sort of thing. It comes along with this course manual, which is one of the most wonderful course manuals that I've seen. There's a link to it's actually composed of 3 independent documents. One of them is the Bees of the Willamette Valleys, which is one of the most beautiful and well illustrated taxonomy books that I've seen for bee identification. It only takes you down to the genus level, and then sort of suggests where you would look for the species level. But it's included in that. And then the other 2 that are included in it are Enhanced Urban and Suburban Landscapes to Protect Pollinators, which is an OSU publication, and the Forests and Woodlands Protect an Ecosystem OSU pub, and then the Management and Planning for Woodland Owners, Why and How, one of our own OSU publications. And those are all bound together in this document and really give you all the materials that you need in order to navigate the class pretty successfully. And so this is just the way that they announced the program, and it's self-paced and you're allowed quite a bit of latitude on how long you have in order to complete each part. And these are the documents that are in that book. And there is a half-day workshop up in Corvallis where they go around to a whole, I think there were 5 different sites in different stages of forestation, cutting down the trees, all the way through years and years of management, and looking particularly at how pollinator habitat fit into good forest management. And it was very, very well-taught course. It included going to the USDA Plant Development Center that's between Corvallis and up on the freeway. Anyway, outside of Corvallis, where they're doing pasture research and hedgerow research for these integrated polyculture plantings. And one fellow named, I believe is Eric Silvernail, or maybe Ivan Silvernail, I think it's, anyway, who's doing work in coming up with different mixes of pasture and meadow plantings that really, really fill out the entire ecology, not just of pollinators, but of grazers and even wildlife. So it's a great workshop. So I highly recommend it if you get the opportunity to take it. So this is the modules that are gone through in the Canvas presentation. These 6 modules, and in order to get the certification, you take the modules, you go on the trip, and you complete a pollinator management plan for the property. And basically that's what we're presenting tonight is, where we are in that process. And you participate in one outreach event, this being that. The person to contact if you're interested in signing up for the next class, which will probably be next year. This information is included in the reference PDF, but this is the person that set it up, and she did an absolutely beautiful job of running this program and a couple of other presentations that I've learned from her, and she's really a pretty remarkable presenter. So by taking that class, the kind of the bottom line is that there are these pretty common sense things. The class goes into really in detail how you can address all of these, and how to do the phenology and pollinator observation in order to kind of see your way through it. And so consistent with a good forest management plan strategy, the first thing you do is go out and discover, see how things are, and then you come up with your goals that you'd like to change and the actions to address those changes. And then you get specific about, how do you address those? What are the tasks and what are the steps in it? The bottom line of going through all of that is what needs to be improved in order to really develop a really healthy pollinator habitat. And so the first element of that is discovery. And I'm going to turn you over to our primary discoverer, Anna Eichner.
Hello, everybody. So last year, when we started to take this class, I sat down with a nice cup of tea because it was cool out, and I just sort of mentally went around the property and thought of all the plants that existed already and where I had primarily where I'd seen pollinators. So did you do this?
Yeah, just down there.
Okay. So at the
I
end,
want to come in and watch TV.
At the end of the list, I had like 40 plants just off the top of my head. And then I realized that there were actually into 3 different categories. So one was landscape that had been here, well established. The other was, we're not sure that they're actually local, but they're definitely volunteers and they would show up on their own. And the third category was cultivated, things that we had grown seasonally. They're all annuals.
No, raspberries are not.
Well, okay, so they're perennials too. They're perennials too. So this is a wisteria that's on the north side of the garage. And it has a lot of flowers that are now starting to dissipate in their scent and nectar and pollen. So, but we have a colony, a well-established colony of carpenter bees in the front. So they frequent this daily. And so I really like to take pictures. So these are some of the pictures that I was able to get, and I'll show you how I got them. So the ally local volunteer plants are really good. The pollinators like them, like purple dead nettle. You can use them as a ground cover, and they're easy to pull. All of these things, they're really wonderful. They keep the moisture in the soil, and they're very happy. Do you want to add anything to this?
No.
Okay. So purple dead nettle, Rachel, I'm apologizing because there might be some henbit in there as well. And this is Phacelia. The pollinators really like it. And they hold their pollen on their legs. And it's so amazing, the different colors of all the pollens. Okay, so then there's a big comfrey plant. Those things, we planted like 55 little half-dead comfreys, and in no time they were ready to take over the world. The pollinators like these too. And this cute little guy is always on the comfrey, except he doesn't show up until the weather is warm. So, okay, so in terms of catching these, I just use a pint size mason jar and a plastic lid.
The video is off.
The video's off?
Yeah.
What does that mean? Nobody can see me?
That's correct.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that. Anyway, I'm big on visuals, so I'm like always doing visuals. Okay, so the jar should fit your hand. You want to be able to hold it easily and be able to have the plant with the bee on it, and just put the jar and the lid together really quickly so that you catch the bee with the plant. Clear glass.
Anna, if you want to, or Scott, if you want to try turning on the video, if it stays stable and you don't have a delay, that's fine.
No, because I'm being Italian. I'm like flailing my arms around.
Okay.
That'll wipe out the bandwidth right there.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't talk unless my hands move, so I apologize. Anyway, so clear glass is really good because when you put the jar with the bee and the plant in the refrigerator, you definitely need to check on the little guy in the refrigerator. So the refrigerator temperature, if it's 35 to 40 degrees, it could take 5 to 15 minutes. If you just put leftovers or groceries in there, it could take up to 40 minutes. So it's better to have it colder, shorter time. If you see that they're on their back, not moving much, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're dead. It just means that they're really, really cold. So this is what I use. And I just carry it around. The towels keep the jars from clanking. I do my best to keep it out of the sun and usually put another towel over it. And I take pictures from all these different sides as best I can. The thing that's really good about having the plants in the jars with the critters is that they really want something to hold on to. The glass is slick, and if there's nothing in there, they just like paw or keep scratching at it because they want to get out. But if the plants are in there, it gives them something to hold on to. They still want to get out, but at least they have something that they're familiar with. The other thing is when they've become immobilized and you dump them out into either pull them out because they're holding on to the plant, or you dump them out gently into the lid, if they're holding on to the plant, you can turn the plant in all these different directions to get pictures. I highly recommend some sort of swivel neck light so that you can get light on them, but not a light that provides a lot of heat, because you don't want them to wake up fast. And what else? So it's very fun to really see the intricacies of these amazing bees. So far I've stuck with bumblebees because they're bigger, they're easier to see and catch. The other thing is the bumblebees, some of them go on a flower and it might be there for 5 seconds. Other bees are very hyperactive and they might be on there for like 1 second and then they go to the next and the next. And I haven't really seen a difference in temperature. It's been more the kind of bee. Okay, and this is buckwheat and this is a fly. Do you want to say anything?
Well, the point is that there are a lot of pollinators out there other than bees, beetles and a bunch of them. So what we're presenting here is, you know, kind of the nominal perspective, not surprising, probably co-funded to some degree from the Bee Atlas. But when you really begin to look at pollinators, you realize that there are a whole bunch of them and that they have other different habitats. And that's why we have beetle bank and other things to supply the needs of other pollinators.
Okay, so this bee came to the lavender on the north side of the house, was there for like less than 5 minutes. I grabbed a camera and took pictures. I still don't know what it is. I haven't been able to identify it, but it's so beautiful and really special. I mean, why did it just pass through here? And this one was very hungry. So just because you see a bee and you see its back end doesn't mean you're going to be able to see the whole thing. Look at this. What a stretch. It's so cute. All right, here, you get Scott back.
All right. So I think you'd agree we've accomplished our discovery step. So we move on to like, what would we like to change about this? And right?
One more thing. It's the living document, like Rachel said.
As well, one of the things about this part of the world is you're not very far away from somebody who could pretty well nail down the identity of any bee that you came across. Now, the normal way of doing that is to kill it and stick a pin on it and send it to a Corvallis. We're not quite into that, but I'm really hoping that the pictures that we're taking will, in the end, be adequate. So, anyway, so we'll move on to our goals. This is the pollinator management plan that, you know, using their template that we came up with, and it's a great way to kind of organize your thoughts around, you know, this aspect of your you know, managing your land. And so we identified, you know, these goals that we needed to, we thought we needed to change about the property. And the bottom line is having as much around for as much as a season as you possibly can. And then to recognize that there are these different nesting behaviors. There's ground nesters and there are cavity nesters and single bees and colonial bees, and they all take a little bit different habitats. And so coming up with a way to work those into the management plans, those habitats, you know, is one of the goals we have. And then we grow coppicing hedges in order to generate ramial wood, which is central to the research that we do on site. And so incorporating one of the beautiful things about those coppicing materials are almost all very, very early pollinators, willows and so forth. They like flower in February, so they really offer the earliest opportunities for pollinators. And at that time of the year, all you have to do is like hang around the willows and you'll find out who's out there, because there's pretty much nothing else out there. As opposed to going through and looking at setting up native pollinators in this area, there's a lot of people doing that, and I applaud those efforts. What I'm really concerned with is what this climate is going to be like in 2030 to 2050. And so OSU Horticulture Department Permaculture Program held a 2-semester class in evaluating climate change. And one of the elements of that is to identify what, where in the world right now is like what the projections would suggest this is going to be. And then looking at what the natives are there, and particularly the plants that those natives rely on, and beginning to get, it's not exactly a refugia, but it's a place for, if they decide to migrate, they'll find pollinators that match their needs. And so that's the kind of the focus for the climatic perspective as far as our planting plan. The places how it turns out that this is going to be like, grow things like olives and many more fruits. And I have to say, from my analysis, the climate is going to improve here, because it's going to get a lot warmer, and the freezing fog will pretty much definitely go away, which I'm definitely in favor of. Anyway, so we came up with these goals, and so we're looking at different ways in our management plan and design that we can meet those goals. And so what we came up with is that we wanted to create these specific sites, and that we'd have these particular sites picked out in the landscape that we would begin to develop. And so these are where we identified these to be, and have begun working on, for varying lengths of time, developing those, and in developing those areas for other uses. Here we're identifying how they fit into the landscape management plan, or the pollinator management plan. And this is more of a close-up here. And so these are the specific things. We came up with areas where we're developing habitat for ground nesting bees. We're replacing the normal lawn area, or part of the normal lawn area, in a pollinator meadow. As I mentioned, that we have this ramia wood coppicing hedgerow, and we're looking at using that to provide shade in the heat of the summer, that shades the fen, the drainage system that is incorporated into this. We happen to be very fortunate that we have a number of springs that I have actually built catchment structures into, I think, 8 now of these springs, and we pull the water across the land in swales and so forth, and we put it into a pond that it's a wildlife pond. This next year we'll be taking much of that flow and putting it into a detention structure and declaring a water right around that. So this is an example of the site, one of the sites we have for pollinator habitat. So I've come in, just done invasive grass removal on this hill slope. And what I'll be doing is first of all, doing my research on, what work has been done in ground nesting pollinator sites. And I've already encountered a number of folks back in University of New Hampshire and Vermont, I think, that have done some work in this. So there's some some literature out there. Anyway, so this is right along the edge of the north edge of our orchard. So I'm hoping that it'll generate a lot of bumblebees and other ground nesting bees there to enhance the pollination of that orchard. So for our cavity nester habitat, we have 64 thornless blackberry plants, and they're old enough now that they put out an enormous amount of biomass. And this next year, I'm going to be weaving that biomass in a wattle wall in order to terrace a hill slope that these blackberries grow on the edge of. This was a dam that was completely covered in Himalayan blackberries, which we have removed along this whole area. And I thought it was only fitting that we replace them with 16 different varieties of thornless blackberries. And I'll tell you, the varieties, the differences between these varieties are really pretty remarkable. But they create this huge amount of these pithy stems that are really perfect for cavity nesters. And so, like I said, this next year I'll be weaving all this material into a wall that's right at the base of this big raspberry stand. But for this year, I stacked them all down here above the fen, down in the shade, figuring it's really well protected and will be nice and warm. Has a really good solar aspect in all through the fall, winter, and through the spring. So it ought to be a good place for cavity nesters to make it through the winter. So we have a specific insectary that's developed that not only does it have principally what it has is habitat where insects breed. And so that's a real focus of the insectary bed. And with, pollinators in there for sure. And so every year, a new ally plant shows up that meets the criteria that were on that slide earlier. And plus, it's almost always a pollinator. And in this case, it's even a nitrogen fixer. And so as these have begun to show up in the succession of the soils that we've developed, going from bacterial rich grassland, disturbed grassland, into now a very, very herbaceous, getting fairly close to early forested fungal bacterial ratio and carbon content and all the things that depict that succession of soils. And sure enough, when you get there, these start showing up along with nightshades and chenopodium. Those are the indicator species to know that you're really making progress with your soils, and they've all shown up. And then one of the things that is troubling is, as you'll see in a minute, we use fava beans as a cover crop, and we harvest it when it's definitely during flower, because if it goes beyond that stage, it begins to get tough and it takes longer to decompose. And we need something that decomposes in less than 30 days. And fava bean is great at that if you catch it at the right stage. The only problem is that when you bring all that down, suddenly you have all these pollinators that have been depending on that. And so you have to have a stage of something that's coming into flower just as that's going out. Well, for the fava beans, it's artichokes. Artichokes put out a huge amount of flowers. The flowers themselves are gigantic. We've seen the widest variety of different kinds of pollinators on artichoke plants. And sure enough, they come into bloom just as we're about to pull down the winter cover crop of fava beans. So this is a little look down our fen, and to the right side of this is the base of the willows. Those willows, right now I'm cutting them and then planting out to get this hedgerow in place. But as soon as that's done, we'll be cutting down these willows and while they're still young wood, and then chipping them up and using them to cover the trenches where we do our analog of composting, our nutrient cycling in the food garden. And that system is absolutely dependent on fresh, easily decomposed, lignin-rich wood in order for that system to operate. And willows are the perfect thing. And so they're growing right at the edge of the fen that is draining the rest of the spring water that I haven't collected off the land, and there's still quite a bit of it. And this fen is designed to carry that water over the longest stretch of terrain across the land, and it's just uphill of the forest garden that we'll take a quick look at later. So that forest garden is built off of the concept of edible forest gardens. This is a beautiful, well-written pair of books that will really change the way that you look at the landscape, not just landscaping, but at the landscape itself. And you begin to visualize and understand guilds and systems of plants and how things change over the succession of plants and so forth. And it's built off of the idea that there are these 7 layers in a forest garden. Each one of them can provide a crop or, basket weaving material or textiles or all sorts of stuff. And that when you build build in all 3 dimensions, well, in 4 counting time, the amount of harvest, the amount of productivity, and the amount of sustainability that comes off of it is much, much higher than, for sure a monoculture, but even a lot of this kind of single layer polycultures that are used in agriculture. So once again, I had the opportunity to take a OSU permaculture class in forest garden design. It was another 2-semester class, and came up with this is the kind of the concept for the plantings that we would be looking at. And so you begin by planting a hedgerow that has the lower stories of your 7 layers, and among them you very strategically plant trees that will eventually grow up to be an upper canopy. And many of the plants that you're planting here will eventually be, essentially overgrown, or a canopy grown up above them. And so you can, by the orientation in sunlight, illumination, and that is largely what controls the orientation of the hedgerows and eventual forest garden on the site, is its orientation relative to the sun. So if you look off to the right from this plan view and then side view, winter solstice sunrise would come in directly from the right of this slide. And so the arches capture that early morning sun, and as it comes around through fall and spring sunrise and sunset, these, given our aspect and where the trees are, this captures the most amount of sunlight that the site really can. And at the same time, it shades it from the a lot of the early morning sun in the summertime. And so it sort of limits the amount of evapotranspiration that occurs in the summertime. And so the darker green stripes on this, I think my cursor, yeah. So the darker green stripes here, each one of those is a hedgerow. And it'll start out with hedgerow plants and have larger plants, trees planted in them. And the lighter colored zones are 10-foot wide paddocks or open spaces that can either be used for alley cropping, or if you decide to do livestock on this, what you can do is just take livestock and move it back and forth through the labyrinth. And this is designed to take a cow-calf pair and goats if you wanted to, you know, a couple of goats and kids, and then poultry. And you could pretty well make it through this cycle in, say, a 40 to 45 day rotation, which is what you would want for in this part of the country, given given our climate and so forth. And all you have to do is put up electric fence to keep them out of the stuff growing in the hedgerows if that's necessary. At the same time, you can also grow their the plants that that provide worm control or parasite control right in the hedgerows, so you don't have to like grow them and grind it up and put in their feed. Anyway, so this is the amount of pollinator habitat that you can put into this third dimension above the ground. I think you would agree is a great way to put in diversity and richness into the design. And so that's why we've included it as part of our that's the component that it fulfills in the pollinator habitat plan. And this is taken this morning this is the hedgerows that I was just pointing to. So if you can imagine the cross section, you're looking down those hedgerows, and you can see we have the paddocks covered up in tarps, and we're about to come along with an electric weed whacker and just vaporize this these fava beans and all of the other stuff that's growing in them. I mean, really, really chop it up fine. And then we'll pull the tarp over it, let it sit there for probably 30 days. It'll be completely finished. And there will be a 2-inch layer of what we call worm cheese left on the top of it with, I think this is almost 4 feet deep there. I feel confident of there being 2 inches of a brand new O Horizon, OZ, I think would be the designation for it, but Horizon, and that's what we'll be planting our summer crops into. And I think it's going to be melons down there, isn't it? Anyway, so, or it depends on what the water situation is. We may just plant it in a summer cover crop and you know, go with that. But I feel pretty confident, given the amount of moisture that I've seen in the fin. The fin is running behind me just up gradient from all of this. So the moisture coming from those springs is being distributed out just uphill of this forest garden area. And so what we end up doing is coming up with these lists of when each plant is flowering. And in this case, it's when each one of our various fruit-bearing plants is actually giving harvest. And you can see that we're pretty well covered. Strawberries start early, stay late. So we are happy to have at least some fresh fruit on the table pretty much all the time through the year. And as we add new plants into this list, we're going to be looking for stuff that isn't blooming during these periods of time, because when you have that much stuff to pick, it's really hard to keep up with it all. So spreading out over a larger area. So that's what we will be looking at adding to this this plant list. And so here's a list of the pollinator chart of that. This is one of several that we've come up with. And you can see in the pink, we have pretty good overlap of pollinators. And then the idea is you move up and down through a given month and count up the number of cells. That gives you, you know, the diversity that there is in the in each one of those months. And you can see I don't know that there's anything out in January. I did see a number of pollinators on the willows in February, so I know they're out there. But if they are out there, I think I think there'll be something there for them throughout the year. And building that, the richness on that is, or diversity on that is, you know, one of the tasks that we'll look at and when we decide what to put the plants we put onto on next. So that is pretty well covers what we've done and our adventure with this. I'd like to point out now one thing about the this pollinator steward program through the Department of Forestry. It's really focused at including a pollinator management plan in your forest management plan. And that's really the way that this last class was designed. The thing about our forest is we just haven't planted it yet. And I'm hoping that I'll see a good start to it in the time that I have to watch it. But anyway, it's not going to stop me from planting it. So there. But if there is another pollinator certification plan that is in Canada, this year's session is just about to end up, and I took it, and it's really, really good. It gives perspectives on cultural perspectives on kind of community scale pollinator, not just pollinator awareness, but sort of a responsibility and making that as part of when you're thinking about you know, how the way you want your cities and neighborhoods to look, to have pollinators as an important part of that for a lot of different reasons. So it has a very much more urban perspective on pollinator stewardship. And they'll be, I'm sure, teaching it again next year. They asked for a donation of 200 Canadian, which, depending on what day you do it, could range from 150 to 170 bucks, somewhere along in there. Anyway, so if you're like play the market, you can strategize for that. But it's a really, really great program. And so particularly if you're interested in more urban perspective. And this is a list of the sessions that they have, and they're presented as webinars, and the people are absolutely remarkable. The whole perspective on indigenous science that natural sciences has begun to adopt, particularly in Canada, is a remarkable shift in the way that you look at natural resources. Very, very different. And I think far more insightful, really. And useful, particularly if you're looking at something like, you know, pollinator habitat or something. And the certification is all will be in the PDF that of this presentation. So you take a look at it, and the references for this presentation are in a separate PDF, because if you try to save them in, you know, as a PDF of a PowerPoint, then the links aren't active. So I save them as separate documents. Anyway, so I can't even see what time it is. Huh?
It's not even 7.
Oh, it's not even 7.
You did good.
Okay. Well, that's kind of a switch for me, actually.
Record.
Anyway, so we have lots of time for questions now.
All right, wonderful. Wonderful, you guys. You can stop your share and put on your video if you want.
Here we go. Okay.
Okay, so we'll just zoom back up here to the top for questions. Let's see. First of all, Christina Lefevre got in. She sent me a question. She was having trouble, but she got in, so I'm really glad about that. And she's our pollinator project, Rogue Valley, right? Isn't that Christina?
Absolutely.
Right, yeah. So she chimed in and she said that she thinks that yellow bee was the male Van Dykii.
Oh, is it? Oh, cool.
That was what her take was.
Yeah. Well, you know, you look at the thing and go, is that exactly? Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So I was wondering, and you might have said it, I was doing a little bit of multitasking, looking at things you were saying there, but do you have an idea of how many species of pollinators you've seen? I know you're not necessarily IDing them all to species, but if you have a guess of how many different kinds you've seen. or
Okay.
bees, or however
Well,
however you're categorizing.
Right. So, you know, of bees, I would say that I could safely say we have 6
to 12.
Oh, including all the bees. I was just thinking bombus.
No.
Yeah,
Just
right.
all the bees.
Yeah.
We have a lot.
Yeah, it's Anna counts them as a dozen or more.
Okay.
But
And then
there are a lot of other pollinators as well. So
yeah, right. And I'm curious about, like, if there were some species that are that attract many more plant species that attract many species of pollinators, or if there are some plants that you might be seeing that only certain pollinators come to, if there's any kind of distinction like that. Are you picking up those sorts of things?
Okay. As I think I mentioned, I've never seen anything like artichokes. For one thing about an artichoke is the flowers are so deep that it takes so long to get down into the pollen that you have plenty of time to observe, you know, the bug. So there's a temporal component of that may skew the statistics or something. But Sean had incredible luck with this variety of safflower. It's a essential. Well, it's pretty close to being a thornless safflower, but he said he got a huge amount of diversity, you know, off of that. But the thing about you know, bees have different sized tongues. Some of them collect the pollen on the hairs around them. Some of them, so in the training, basically they say that you want to have as much diversity of long tongue flowers versus short tongue flowers, and that sort of thing. And so there are, I've already seen a couple of lists that people have put together that sort of answer that question for you, like what, you know, gets all of the different tongue lengths and buzz size.
Right. That cool. That's
going to be different from area to area. You know, in a very arid environment, it'd be, you know, whatever alkali bees like or whatever. Right.
Well, one of the things I was wondering, and I'll get to some more questions in a second here, but I was thinking about Doug Tallamy, which I know a lot of our audience will have read books by him, the Bringing Nature Home, for example, and he talks about how native plants support native insects, not just pollinators, but, you know, all kinds of native insects. And those insects, especially in their juvenile stages, are food for birds and other wildlife, and so they support them. And one of the things that I really appreciate that he says is plant a few of these real powerhouse species or genera, including oaks and prunus, which is, we have a lot of native prunus here, and that there will be hundreds of species that are supported by those plants. And then, you know, sprinkle around many insects are incredibly, at least natives are incredibly specific. They'll just go to certain things. So I was wondering if you had observed anything like that. But
well, one thing when I was doing the bee atlas stuff and looking at, you know, what the most common things for the native plants are, plant species are, then, you know, incorporating them, you know, in the mix. But see, the way I'm sort of doing that is, you know, the food forest has its own thing, and having, you know, local species in there is a good thing. But instead of having ornamental plants, I have native plants as my ornamental plants.
Right. You know, yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's super.
So, I collect them, and, you know, and they have that place in the planting plan. And, like, you know, who needs that?
Yeah, you know, Scott, I know you've been talking about the speedwell and the dead nettle and those, which are not native, but I know they do support, you know, pollinators and whatnot. And one of the genera that Tallamy really recommends is strawberries, Fragaria. Yeah. And our native wood strawberry is just going crazy in all my understories. It's a great ground cover.
It's like crazy.
Yeah, it's fabulous, fabulous. Right.
Yeah. Anywhere else it would be like you know, an invasive plant, but here,
right, no. Right. I love it. Right. Good. Okay. Well, getting on to our questions here. So, and it's great to see all the pictures of your farm, and I can't wait to get out there again. It feels like it's been a lifetime, but things are really progressing. Let's see. Tate, who was in our online class last session, said, "Aren't the blackberries a fire hazard over time?" So, if you could talk about a little bit about your blackberry management, and I think kind of thinking about what we saw with the Almeida and the blackberries being such a fire hazard in that fire.
Oh yeah, but the thing is, they're so valuable. The canes are so valuable as wattle. They have all that waxes and stuff that are in it. So I build, whenever I'm going to terrace out a hill slope, and I have a number of them that I'm working on, then I'll come along and they just cut down a whole bunch of fig trees out at the extension. Well, we hauled them off away from the burn pile, and we're using those as posts. And then we do the wattle of these, the canes. And so all of the dry canes are all utilized. Well, the thing is that you have this little, maybe 2-foot high wall. The ends of all the canes are all open. So you have all this pollinator habitat that's kind of like a multi-story apartment building of, habitat there. So,
So, and I think the difference, Tate, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Scott, but I think that you're not allowing that empty, dry, dead blackberry material to build up underneath. You're probably pruning your blackberries, aren't you? Because you're managing them. Yeah. So then
they're growing up into an archway, and if you let that get away from you, that's I mean, boy, if you let those canes build up in an archway over there, that would be a fire hazard. It's basically a tunnel. No, but like I said, they're just too valuable to leave in place. So, we're strategizing every year on which ones are going to take out.
What are we going to use? Yeah. Okay. Let's see. And then Julie says, do the thornless blackberries outcompete the Himalayan? And how do you keep the Himalayan blackberries from returning?
I have to say, I mean, I've said it repeatedly, tarping is the best way to get rid of blackberries. It's all timing, like any integrated pest management thing, is this time of the year when they're beginning to put out those really huge, luscious, fluffy, but soft, canes. You just come in and cut back whatever it is you can manage a removal on this time of the year, and then I come along with a weed whacker and crunch down all the material and really compress it down close to the ground, because it's building habitat for centipedes and like who knows what else, and they will rip it to pieces as long as it's in the dark. As long as they're protected from birds and all the other predators, they can go hog wild underneath there. And as long as you keep it reasonably moist, all that material will decompose certainly in a season.
And I think you gave a class, which I think is on our YouTube. I'll try to find that link and put it in there. And I'll put a link to many of our classes that are given, we put up onto our YouTube channel, and they're available, maybe not immediately, but eventually. And I think there was one about that. So I'll try to find that link and that website and put that out for folks here.
If people want to see how to do it, I still have a wall of blackberries that I'm, working my way on, because, I've got a lot of things to do. I can only fight that fight, in incremental units. Right. Basically 14 feet at a time, because that's the width of the tarp.
Oh, nice. Well, that paces yourself. Yeah. Okay, good. And then Christina said, are the fava beans in the ground? And I think they are, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Eve says, are the charts you're showing us available as XLS? So those are, I'm forgetting the name for those. I think where you're talking about the fruiting, kind of the time frames. There's a name for that kind of chart.
Is it part of phenology? I don't know.
No, I can't remember.
Yeah.
Did somebody say it?
Yeah. No, I'm just thinking the XLS is all I wanted of that, whatever that kind of chart.
Do you mean as a template, or to see what he has?
Well, I mean, I think that
what you have, because I'm new in the area, I think it'd be really helpful to see.
Oh, sure.
What you found be great.
Oh, yeah. Happy to share.
Okay.
Is it a bar chart that you're talking about?
Well, they're just Excel spreadsheets that, we fill the cells if there was, it's a binary statement. Is it or isn't it, and if it is.
You have the months and then, Yep. Right. Okay. And Christina's saying, Lacey Facilia is awesome. Hope
Yeah.
she's right on her ID.
Yeah.
Please comment on your habitat for ground nesting bees. And I think you kind of covered that. So if you would like more on that.
When we were on the field trip up to Corvallis on the pollinator field trip, they went into some detail at describing how you could incorporate road cuts in hillsides. And there were particular ways you do it and certain heights that you did it and stabilities and certain soil types that would work and certain that didn't. And so they went into some detail on ground nesting habitat. And so I took what I learned from that and looked at our site to see, okay, well, what's like that? And then over the course of time, I'll be growing whatever plants optimize that opportunity.
You have trefoil too.
Yeah, and currently the trefoil grows across there, and the place that I have seen the most ground nesters is under that trefoil because it's just floppy on the surface, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
I see. So it keeps a kind of a bare ground underneath.
Yeah, I mean they can race. They can race to the edge of it and take flight.
Right. And then Mike Buck, who's also a land steward from out of the area, says, is there a native species that attracts multiple pollinators? I see many bumblebees on lupin, but not other bees, for instance. Is there a genus family like rose that is more favorable? I know that, you know, we have a number of native Facilias, and you're further north, Mike, but Facilias I know are pretty popular, and I don't know the specifics, but again, Doug telling me in terms of just supporting native insects, really, I mean, the oak supports everything, right? So any oak is super. All the prunus are supposed to be really good. And Fragaria, I think those were the top three. So that's really? a tree, a shrub, and a ground cover. And the Fragaria is the strawberry. So those are some that you could start with, but I know that Facilia, I've seen lots of things and heard it recommended, and there are lots of native Facilias.
Mm-hmm. They're beautiful too.
And feel free, if anybody has an idea, drop some ideas in the chat too. If somebody else has something else to offer. Yeah. Let's see. Hey, can I trade something for some strawberries? Yes, Christina, we'll talk offline. Michael Buck, one of my fave native bees is Idaho gumweed, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah. Grindelia nana. Michael Buck, one of my favorite natives is, okay, we got that. Okay, that answers that. So, okay. So here's another question that might be kind of in a different direction, but Tate says, can you address mowing in pastures? Right now, there are many flowers that will produce seed and grass. Seed, I don't want to mow until the seeds have matured, but that gets into fire season. Also, insects have life cycles in all these pasture plants, which mowing may interrupt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, yeah. When we go and do, you know, our fire management side of weed control, what I found is if you have the right herbaceous plants going there, and you keep down, I mean, for me, keeping down the grass is the critical thing to keeping it safe and moving the land succession from being a disturbed grassland to being, which is very brittle, to being a far less brittle intermediate species or intermediate sear in moving toward succession. So I feel like that as far as fire danger, moving it away from that brittle, disturbed land, grasses and brassicas and those things, you know, takes the landscape in a safer way, and it provides a much broader habitat for pollinators, because, you know, if you're looking at primarily wind-blown or wind-seeded crops, you know, they're not relying on pollinators, and as far as I'm concerned, they're just taking up space. So.
Yeah, and you know, that kind of gets into those guidelines for integrated pest management, but just integrated land management, and knowing what species you're trying to promote and host and what you're trying to deter. That's definitely true. And I know I don't hear it talked a lot about here, but I grew up in the Midwest, and they definitely, like, they held off on mowing the roadsides, for example, to protect ground nesting birds, which is definitely also another factor.
Yeah.
So I would say, and around here, I think they want you to kind of have your grasses mowed by June 15th or so. And when does fire season start? Often. So yeah, those are good questions, and kind of looking in more to what you're promoting and all those factors make it that
I
chart.
forgot to put a reference in the list, and I'm going to hold this up. This is Weeds Control Without Poisons by Charles Walters Jr. And this will completely change your perspective on weeds. What this points out is that every weed that's out there, if you begin to study it, and this book helps, tells you something about what's going on in the soil at that particular stage of soil development. And not only what's going on, but that plant has specific components that fix that problem. And so if you go out and you kill these things and don't go in, and I mean, there are certain things that I get rid of, but it's because I'm sure that I am doing as good a job of what they're doing as they were, and they're getting in the way of moving the succession on. So you see what I'm saying? But weeds, I would have to say that probably 60% of the things that people would call weeds, they're an important part of the operation.
Right.
Pollinators, biomass. I mean, we let these things grow up as long as they're not, invasive or thorny or something like that, to grow up as big as they can get until the day it sets a flower. And then we take it down and we put it into our composting system.
Right.
And that's tons, literally. That's tons of biomass and nutrients that are in the biomass that are going into our garden beds.
Right.
And it composts it just fine. We'll get rid of those nice juicy weeds in the summertime. 2 weeks they're gone. You can fill the trench and they'll be gone. And it's all going into the soil. So.
Right. The flowering is just key. I know. And with the grasses, we were just discussing some like ripgut brome, which is really, really horrible. If you can get before it sets seed. Right. So it's that whole timing. What do you want? What don't you want? And kind of what are the trade-offs?
If you just focus on going after those guys that are right now trouble, and then the rest of them, you just kind of, just keep an eye on them. And, as long as they're not drying out, they're shading the soil, keeping the soil cooler. They're putting carbon into the soil, feeding soil microbes, all that stuff. There's really nothing wrong with them until that day that they seed, and then it's over.
Okay, and Donna, I'm going to answer this question quickly. The tarping over the piles of trimmings are meant to keep them kind of dry for fuel, for burning when they burn during the burn season. That's kind of a different, if that's what you're getting at.
That's kind of the opposite of what I do. So,
right. Yeah. Okay, and there's a nice link in there. If anybody knows, if you want to save the chat, you go down to the chat box and you click those 3 dots and it will save on your computer as a text. Let's see.
I wondered how you did that. Oh, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Could you repeat? Okay, the 3 plants starting with oak that make up the 3-story pollinator habitat. I didn't get all 3. So this is more than pollinator. It's just supporting native insects that support native wildlife diversity, and it's the oak. Prunus is another big genus, and Fragaria, which is strawberry genus. And there may be more. Let me find a book and show here. This is, let's see here. Oh, I have put it somewhere, but Bringing Nature Home. I'll try to put that into the chat here in a minute too, by Doug Tallamy. Is a great kind of detailed look with a East Coast focus, but he also addresses the West Coast, and there are ways to look into the facts for the West Coast as well. Garden Ecology Lab has produced a series on the top 10 Oregon native plants for pollinators, including which exact pollinators are drawn to each plant. Super, that's answering the question. Thank you. Thank you, Anna. Okay, let's see. Except that many of those weeds are invasives from other countries. Do they actually fit into our native ecology? Just asking.
Yep.
Probably depends on who you ask.
Right, exactly.
Well, I think you got to
if
that
they
a little
grow,
bit.
they're at least biomass, you know, and if they're, I guess if they're taking up space that other stuff, you know, would take up, then there would be an argument for that. So I'd have to look at
well, you know, I mean, there's another great quote that that another land steward shared with one of our classes from a book she was reading, and it said, you know, if you want to get rid of your weeds, just reclassify things, you know, like what's going to actually be a weed. And I sometimes people are upset about native things. In fact, I was thinking I wanted another name for poison oak. It's such a pejorative word, you know, for that native plant. Well, yeah, but it also has, you know, has a lot of good roles. It provides pollination. It provides great fat, rich food for migrating birds. So, you know, like don't get rid of it where it's bothering you, and otherwise it's a part of the system. But like, for example, the hairy cat ear, the false dandelion, has a taproot. I know I've told this story a number of times, but my side yard was just my driveway. I have a lot in town. It was a driveway. I pulled up the driveway. It's compacted gravel, and it's quite green back there now. And that false dandelion has done a lot towards breaking up that compacted soil. I mean, I've also worked at it as well too. But
it evolved to do that.
Yeah, these ruderal species, right? They come into open areas. It's what they do. Yeah. So. But yeah, and also really keeping on top of removing the things, watching. I know I've done that a lot. I'm dealing with a small space, so it's easy. If you have acres and acres, that's a bit more difficult, but you know, you can really get ahead of things and move things out that you don't want, and encourage the native, and even get plant starts or native plant seeds and bring them in too, depending on what your circumstances. I know I got all my natives are really, really, really happy. Another great ground cover, which I don't think they know enough about in terms of pollinators, is wild ginger. I have Asarum caudatum, and if you have shady spots that are kind of it grows next to stream sides, but also in, you know, relatively in areas in our forest, you know, like dry north sides where they won't get any water all winter. So even our riparian species sometimes will support, you know, have more drought resistant, drought tolerant species. So, and that one's got really beautiful flowers. Somebody just told me there was an exhibit at the Schneider Museum that has a man with an Asarum beard, and showed me a picture of that. So if anybody, I haven't gotten out to see it, but it was inspired by Robin Wall Kimmerer's book, I guess, that art exhibit, if anybody's seen that. So I think, let's see, and Marcy plugs the nature of oaks. Yes. Master gardeners sell many varieties of native plants. Yes. Yes. There are lots of good sources. Are you selling right now, Sean? Or are you having a sale soon? Watch for plant sales. There are a lot. There's the Rogue Native Plant Partnership. There's Klamath Siskiyou Seeds. A lot of, and the Master Gardeners definitely have. They're developing lots of natives in their offerings. Just had another one coming next month. Talent Garden Club is selling Klamath Siskiyou native plants this weekend. Oh, there we go. Where is that happening? In Talent, I'm guessing. Christina says.
Yeah, it's happening in Talent. You'd have to go on Facebook. I shared it on our page, but I don't remember where, but it's in Talent. And we have 2 each year. We'll have another one in the fall. Everything, you know, happening, willing. So yeah, we had 6 vendors at our spring sale. We had Freshwater Trust there too. Woohoo.
Oh, here we go. I found that link. Wonderful. Oh yeah, Freshwater Trust. Right, great. Yeah. So keep, there's that one, and that has the sale. I was gonna put the, if anybody else has other, so I'm gonna put just our YouTube channel that has lots of classes now, quite a library of classes. And oops, I gave that to Christina instead of everyone. Let me fix that. There's that's our YouTube channel. And let me also, this is the Talent Garden Club sale, which is happening. And I think in here, weed control and soil development using tarping with Scott Good. So another. Whoops. Okay, there we go. All right. Marcy says the Talent Garden Club will be at 55 Talent Avenue, May 21st at 10 a.m. All right. Well, I think we have reached the end of the questions. Feel free to drop. Sean Cawley is, he's taken the online land steward class. He's a master gardener. And I think he's also been living out at your place with his tiny home, hasn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, he's a great
part
resource.
of the crew.
Yes, very industrious. He was one of the very active group of contributors in the online land steward course when he took it. All right. Well, I think we've reached the end of our questions and our comments. I'll share this recording and any resources that Scott shares with me. And thank you. And that was really great. Lots to see. I can't wait to get out to your place again, Scott.
Looking forward to it. You're all welcome.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm going to put our poll up. So if you're still here, just a quick 3-question poll. And can somebody tell me if they're seeing that, hopefully?
Yes.
Oh, there we go. Okay, responses, yes. Good, so I'll just leave that up there for a minute and you can duck out, or I'll just close the room eventually when it looks like everyone's participated. Thank you, Marcy, for being here and everyone. All right, I think we're there.